We plummeted, sales tax fell all the way down to 27%, and that was during the recession, and so as Gary said, that's extremely volatile, so it's a great thing that we're going up, but we have to be very, very careful and monitor that, and if we see any turn in that sales tax, then we have to take action pretty quickly, because you can't wait and let that get ahead of you if those collections start dropping below budget.
Another volatile place in that, you got, maybe like me, you think, well, we're just a little bitty people in a little bitty city, and a big old state, we're lost. But there is a sizable amount of money that we get from housing immigration prisons. Today in Congress, they're struggling with immigration. Depending on which way that goes and which way the administration acts in response to it, that immigration money that we get could go up a little bit, it could go down to nothing. And so that, if we talk about the volatility of sales tax, but a national
Immigration
crisis
taxes.
could have a drastic impact, but that is $250,000 that is part of that. That's one thing.
Miscellaneous.
The jail revenue is in fines and fees.
Okay.
It's over that 14%. But yes, as Gary mentioned, that,
Depending on the taxes.
that could go away.
Depending on the tax rate, if it were to go away. And so, what I'm saying, you think, well, federal issues don't really impact us. Well, that is one that's staring us in the face that I don't have a clue which way it's going to go. I do know that we're going to be hurt if it goes away. And someone asked the other day, are we housing children, immigrant children? Absolutely not. We don't have a facility for that.
What's the objective of the county commissioner in Dallas? Is he trying to make money on that?
I don't have a clue. I honestly don't have a clue. I don't think there's any money to be made. So I don't know if it's, well, I'll keep my opinion myself. I don't know.
Might be trying to-
What I do know is we are only keeping adults, and we've done this service for about 30 years now. So we're not doing it in response to the immigration. We've just done it for years. And if it will keep up, we'll continue to do it because it's good revenue for us.
Does it influence the size of the facilities we built because we've been already doing it for so long?
Part of the did your son work in the jail?
He did,
Yeah.
I
Part of
we
the-
talked about that. But
Part of the size of that was based on the prediction that this business would continue, and in fact, it has. That building, more than halfway paid for it now. And so it's done well for us. And that's why we need to keep going, because we don't need that size jail, but for just our prison. I think in this last month, last week, we've kept 90 people all come through the week. So it's good.
On the expenditure side, our budget for the current year was $33,851,706. You can see the change in our expenses is primarily salaries, insurance and benefits. That's a 3.25% salary package, along with our insurance and benefits. Our rebates obviously are up because sales tax is up. Professional and technical is up $128,000. That includes a variety of departmental increases. That's mowing expenditures, $32,000. That's about $25,000 extra for legal. We've not raised our legal expenses, I think, as long as I've worked here. Judge services, $10,000, HV transit, $2,500, and then there's some other contractual increases. Utilities there, $39,000, maintenance, $51,300, and supplies, $39,000. Equipment maintenance, that's a depreciation charge, is up $57,000, and then others, about $90,000, and then supplemental program that Gary mentioned is $20,000. That is the part-time employee that works in Kyle's division. And that would be a total budget of $35,724,258 with the capital carryover and then the proposed capital that we'll discuss in tab 5. So that would be an overall increase in this budget of 5.5%.
By the way, the legal, I don't want you to think Wayne has raised his rate. We've just not raised that in forever, and the excess has been going to a special legal fund. And it's just never to recognize it as day in, day out legal services.
what's the rebates and incentives?
That is, we have chapter 380 agreements where with several of our developments, when they come into town and they offer to bring a development, that we'll make it, in most cases, it's called chapter 380 sales tax rebate agreement, where They do some infrastructure improvements, we agree to rebate to them maybe 25% of their sales tax for X number of years. So their sales tax goes up, the rebate goes up. And then this is that breakdown by departments. You can see that most of our, about 60% of our budget goes to police and fire. You've got public works at 5%, administration 6%, and that is your library, facilities, HR, information services. And then non-departmental, that's got our legal, our electric, our water, gas, Trinity Rail Express, things like that, and non-departmental. Then if you look at it by type, as Gary said earlier, 77% of this total budget is going for personnel. So when you pay the rebates of 5%, you pay utilities of 3%. We've got 5% for supplies and maintenance. We've got 5% in just other and 4% professional services. So obviously, if there's any kind of downturn in the economy, if you're not impacting personnel, you have very few dollars that you can impact, because obviously you can't impact the rebates, they're contractual. And then you can't impact your utilities because those bills are going to come. So you can see there just aren't very many other dollars in that budget that aren't personnel related. If you look at our taxable valuations though, we have great news here. We have hit a historical high on our taxable values. You can see that in 2010-11, that's when we lost value. We lost about 8% of our value. We have now gained all of that back, and our values this year are at $3.05 billion. That's up 6.7% for this year, which is very good news. This map is one that David Allen is nice enough to prepare for us every year. If you'd have seen this map last year, I should have probably even put this in here to show you. We had several areas last year, our residential areas, that were still red, that were losing value. Morristown in particular was in that. Midway Park was in that was red. You'll see those areas have turned, Morristown in particular down as green this year, which means they've seen increasing values. And then most of the rest of the city is either yellow, which is holding flat, or green is actually improving. We only have just a few little scattered areas of red. So the positive thing is for our residents is they are seeing their home values increase back. There are very few areas that we've seen that had declining values this year. We went in, and this is a chart we prepared last year to kind of just take some random addresses and show what had happened. Last year we had several of these that had declined. If you look on this chart, there's only one that was on Martha Street that actually saw a decline this year. And certainly there can be specific issues that might cause the property to decline. But most of these have either held or remains or are increased. If you go to the next slide, the same thing, I believe there's 4 there that have held, and the rest have increased. So the good news is there our property owners are seeing their values restored.
I'm surprised on your map. I think our hot growth area was in the red.
That's generally
It's right now, it's
because
dirt.
when they are developing, there's typically a protest that will occur, and so TAG will typically come in and set those values, because you've got a construction area and it's not clearly defined, and they'll come in and protest those. So I'm not really that surprised to see those in the red.
And the irony of that is, because there's a PID, if they get it down low enough that it doesn't pay the debt, then they get a PID assessment.
Yeah.
So it's.
They get hit one way or the
It's kind
other.
of grim
So, yeah.
to see that.
But you'll see like the apartments sometimes will be red. Apartments protest every year, no matter what, and so they'll typically get some kind of assessment change.
Well, basically, all your big commercial places they hire companies to protest, and it's every time.
You can see we had very little this time. So,
Most of the little red things you got there are probably undeveloped. Look at the little pockets there.
this though, we wanted to say that, okay, so the good news is that people's values are being restored, but we're saying, okay, some might argue, well, that means I'm gonna have to pay more tax. So we also did an analysis to say, houses that are on the market today, go out and find some from various neighborhoods across the city that are on the market today, and look and see how it compares to their TAD value. Are the houses selling for more than the TAD value, or has TAD, overpriced the homes? And if you look at this was again just a random sample of houses on the market today, and you can see that most of those people are selling their houses or trying to sell their house for significantly more than the 2014 TAD value. So even though the TAD values have increased, they're significantly below what the resident still believes that his house is worth on the market today.
Well,
So-
if Mayor Pro Tem was here tonight, I think she'd people are getting asking price or even higher.
Yeah.
And I can attest to that.
But
So it's, and within days or
My
hours.
house was that day at 141, and so when they,
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like the $30,000 range is certainly what folks are asking over the tag value for their houses. One house there in Hollywood, they're really asking above the tag value.
If it's happening, they can only go up by 20% a year, isn't that right?
Even if they raise it, then their tax bill can only go, the tax bill is capped, the assessed value can go ahead and go what they think it needs to be, but the taxes are capped in how much they'll charge them, and they phase that in. And I believe the limit is 10% per year. And then the tax rate, y'all can see we keep 1995 on there, so you can see our high was at 61.6 for 2006 and 7, and every year since then on, since 1995, that rate has either been reduced or held. And obviously, as Gary said earlier, we are recommending a rate reduction of 1/4 cent for the upcoming year, which would take it to 46.75. You'll see as we do our comparisons that that's going to be very comparable to our neighboring cities as well. That component is broken down when you assess the tax rate. It has to be done in two components: an INS, which is your interest in sinking for your debt service, and your M&O. Your interest in sinking is required by law. You have to levy a tax rate sufficient to pay your debt. That's rounding to 10.3 cents for debt. It's actually 10.2995, I believe. And then the balance is available for our maintenance and operations. But when you see your tax rate ordinance, that would be levied in those two
Let me
components.
just ask you, this is just a hypothetical question, I don't want to take much time. If, let's say we had Grapevine's sales tax, which is $49 million, which would more than cover our entire budget plus some, we'd still have to have 10.3 cent property tax?
You can designate that you have other revenue sources that you are committing to pay that debt, and when you do your debt calculation, you can commit those resources to pay that debt and lower it by that
Okay.
amount. But you have got to demonstrate that you're
You
committing
have
that for
to.
that purpose, or else you have to levy the tax. Because you
have to
commit,
be really, really careful with
Oh,
your
yeah.
ratings.
Yeah.
Because one of the things they look at is there a willingness to assess the tax rate that's adequate to
Yeah.
pay your debt.
if your bond holders, you've committed to them that you're gonna pay, they're gonna get paid.
Yeah.
If we could get $49 million a year in sales tax, our rating's probably okay.
Yeah.
That is a critical component of that rating.
Oh, I was gonna say, if we had that much, we wouldn't have, well, Grapevine does, but
Yeah.
we would.
They got a lot of debt. Okay, so then if you look at our average home value, I want to point out on this slide that our value has increased nicely to $151,470. We talked about the values of individual homes have been being restored back to the values that they had seen before 2008, but the majority of this is coming from our new housing developments. Our new housing developments have starting prices in the high 200s, low 300s as kind of a starting point. Those are going very often into the $400,000 and up to $500,000 range. So that is really impacting our average home value. Most of this is being driven by those new subdivisions that are going in. Our tax rate impact. Our average home value, and that's what all of our calculations are done from, is $151,470. We give a 20% homestead exemption, and so the taxable value is $121,176. The tax on that for a home of average value would be $566.50 a year, or $47.21. And so we've always said before, for $47.21, I feel like it's a pretty good deal that you get 24-hour police and fire and everything else that you get from the city of Euless, your library and your parks, but that is basically what a home of average value would pay. On the senior citizen side, in addition to the 20% homestead exemption, we give an over 65 exemption of $35,000. So their net taxable value on a home of average value, which is their average value is $134,492, is a value of $72,594 that's taxable. So that makes their tax burden at the, and I'm sorry, that says the proposed rate of 47 cents. I didn't get that changed. That should be 46. I think the math is right, but my note is not right. It's 46.75, and that's $339.38, and the monthly tax burden is $28.28. I know, I missed that. This chart is taking, if you look at that column in purple there, we've taken our average home value, and we have applied their exemptions if they offer one, and their tax rate to show you what the tax bill would be from each of those cities at that tax value. So if you look at Euless, we said a home of average value in Euless will pay $566. That same bill in Bedford would be $749, and that's because Bedford does not get a homestead exemption. That same bill in Hurst would be $737. North Richland Hills would be $785. Grapevine would be less at $415, and Colleyville would be $539, so they would be just slightly less. And to tell you the tax rate equivalent of Bedford and Colleyville not granting homestead exemptions, their tax rate, if they were to grant the 20% homestead exemption, would be 61.8 cents. So when you see Bedford's rate of 49.48 cents and 0 homestead, if they had 20% homestead, that equivalent rate would be 61.8 cents. And Colleyville's would be 44.5 cents. So you can see that our tax rate is still very, very competitive. That other information over there shows you what their average values are in their cities and what their taxes are on their average value home. Obviously, the average value of their homes in Grapevine and Colleyville are significantly higher, so their average tax bills, based on their rates, are much higher.
When you look at that difference in Hurst and think about it, about that water bill, their water bill is considerably higher. So it costs you much more to live. I'm not picking on Hurst, but there's others in the same boat. They're stuck out there at the highest water rate. It's a significant difference.
The one thing we do want to point out to you, though, is if you choose to adopt the recommended tax rate, which is a decrease of a 0.25%, there are notices that will still have to be published. The good news, those notices have actually changed, and they changed for the better for this upcoming year, but there are several actions that you would be required to take if you want to adopt the recommended tax rate. If you do that on August the 12th, you will have to vote to place a proposal to adopt the tax rate on the September 9th agenda. And you will have to state what that tax rate is. You must be specific as to what tax rate you're proposing. And if you choose to adopt the tax rate of 46.75 cents that we're recommending, you will then have to also schedule 2 public hearings because that does exceed the effective tax rate. We've talked to you before about that effective tax rate calculation. Effective tax rate calculation is basically intended to be a calculation that says, what rate would you adopt to ensure that you do not receive 1 penny more than you received the prior year? And so, unless you're willing to adopt that rate, then you will always have these notices and hearings to go through. So, and then on August the 26th, you would have to take action to ratify the property tax revenue increase that is reflected in the budget. You would hold that first public hearing on the tax rate, and you would also hold the public hearing on your budget that night. So that's on your August 26th meeting. You would then have to schedule your special call meeting for September the 2nd. And obviously, the date doesn't have to be September the 2nd, but there's a little variation in that, not a whole lot that we can do. But that would be to hold the second tax rate public hearing. And then on September 9th, you would have to vote to adopt the tax rate. And there is specific language in that vote, and I'll show you that here in just a second. And then once all the budget is adopted, there's a notice that Janine would have to put on the website and in the front of the final budget book. This is the new notice, and it's actually much better. In the past, we had to publish the effective tax rate calculation. We had to publish a notice that said notice of tax increase, and then we had to publish a notice that said notice of public hearing on tax increase. Well, that has all been consolidated into this one notice that has to be published, and it would state what our proposed tax rate is. It would state what the tax rate was in the prior year, so you can see it is being reduced. It would state what the effective rate is, and ours is 45.1310 cents. And then it would state the rollback rate, which is higher at 47.15.
What is the rollback rate?
It's a rate that's basically theoretically 8% higher than the effective, and is a point at which the citizens could petition to have the rate reversed back to the effective or the prior year, whichever's lower. And so then this is basically the notice that would go in the newspaper, and it would tell them what our rates are. In my opinion, this is much better than what we've had in the past, because it is telling them what we're proposing, what our prior year rate was, and what the effective rate is, and what the rollback rate is. I do want to point out here, you see that rate of 4513. The next time you see this, it's probably going to be 4517. Jackie and Janina were notified by Tarrant Appraisal District today that there was one property that was omitted from the tax increment reinvestment zone at Glade Park that should have been in that. that affects this calculation just ever so slightly. It also will affect our revenue in the tax and increment reinvestment fund ever so slightly. And so they're gonna make those calculations after tonight, and when we bring you your budgets, we'll bring you a supplement with that and whatever else you might want us to do on your August the 27th meeting. And then we will have that little bitty change made, but that one property we believe is gonna change that number to like 4517.
But one point here, this is absolute fussing, but this is all done under the truth in taxation law. There is no truth to that. That statement, your taxes owed under any of the above rates, and then it tells you how to calculate it, that's not right. Because you don't get your senior exemption, you don't get your homestead
Yeah.
exemption, nor do you get the fact that if you're a senior, your taxes are frozen.
That's right.
So, and I know they can't put all that on one sheet, but I just always amazes me that they have us do all this to tell the truth
Yeah.
when it's not the truth.
Yeah, when I was at the new council person training recently, they talked about the effective tax rate, and they definitely had a bias toward the truth in lending way of looking at it with the effective tax rate. It's interesting because it's, you know, they were sort of like saying, this is the way you all need to go out and do it in your cities, you know?
It is in a time, well, I won't get on my soapbox. It just, we've shown the slide for many years here of how that was so deceptive, because it is simply a calculation that theoretically, it doesn't even produce the same revenue as the year before, because there's a whole lot of adjustments to that. But it's just simply a number that theoretically would produce the same revenue that you received the year before. So that would go under the position that you could always operate under the same revenue. And so.
Yeah, and then there's no inflation,
that
there's no
there would be
change.
no- and therefore, we have not raised your taxes unless your value has changed.
And here's some of the unfairness. Our state senator not very long ago spoke about how the rainy day fund in Texas is growing and growing because of the growth and all the people moving into Texas. Yet they never have to advertise that they're raising taxes.
There's always something we're real proud of, because you saw that chart logo, that's bookends of a
Yeah.
significant decrease in 2008 and a decrease this year that we're recommending, where if you look around, I won't call another city's name, but if you look around, some of them started out, that 08, at about where we were, and today they're over 60 cents. Never once have they advertised that they're raising taxes.
And we've had.
We've done it every year, but it's ours. I mean, I'm really proud to recommend this to y'all this year, because to me, it is the utmost in honesty to our citizens.
Well, the thing, our citizens have never complained about
They
it.
have not. They have understood it, and they've stuck with us through that, I think, in understanding that,
Well, we did the right thing for them. It was a lot harder for us than the other cities because they were able to keep their income and keep their staff and keep.
We had to
Now
take
the
the
things
heat.
going up, they got a ton more money.
Oh, yeah,
You think
especially
what-
now.
You think what 13 cents on our tax rate?
Oh, yeah.
That $280,000 or $90,000 a penny,
Yeah.
but, yeah.
because that only ever looks back 1 year. And so in those years, 9, 10, 11, 12, when you're holding, every year that you were forfeiting it and you were not raising that, then you were forfeiting it. So because it's only ever looking back 1 year, you have forfeited that forever. If you kept raising it every year, then your bar started up here, our bar started down here. And so that you can see clearly what's happening there. And now as values are increasing, hopefully will continue to increase, there will continue to be that spread. Our effective will always be lower than probably where we're going to be recommending. But if you think about it, if that theory holds true, that that's to keep you at the 08, basically revenue level, what else is it the same price it was in 08? I mean, you've got to have some sort of way to pay for those contractual increases that the city has incurred and the salary increases and benefit increases that have occurred over that period of time. So my guess is we want to obviously take as little as we have to take, and then if you can do a cut, make a cut. But in our mind, the effective at this point is just, it's one of those things you're going to have to deal with pretty much every year. This is the notice of the public hearing on the budget. It is basically the same as it's been in the past. but it will have also a statement in there, and don't go trying to tie all of these tax numbers back. The truth in taxation tells us what numbers have to go in there and what percent. Janine and I looked at these, and we don't even understand ourselves, but these are what the publications. This says this budget will raise more property taxes than last year's budget by $579,326 or 4.47%. Of that amount, $271,185 is tax revenue to be raised for any property added to the tax roll. This is a legal calculation that she does, mandated by the state, and that's the notice that has to go in there. But this is advising of the public hearing. If you go look at in your tab 1, it's not going to tie back to those numbers of the revenue, but they tell you what you include and what you exclude, and that's the way the publication looks. When you make a motion on the tax rate, this is about the silliest thing I've ever seen, but you will have to say, I move that the property tax rate, not property taxes, but that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of a tax rate of 0.4675, which is effectively a 3.59% increase in the tax rate. So even though you are lowering the tax rate, your motion will say that you moved that the property tax rate be increased. This is state mandated language. If it said, I move that property taxes be increased by the adoption of tax rate, I could probably accept that, but the way they word it is that the property tax rate be increased, and I had you need to pull it out, look at it again to be absolutely certain, and that's the way it is required to be made. We'll write that up for you in the CCC at whatever rate you obviously tell us to put in there, but, and then the website posting that would have to go on there is, then deals with the M&O portion of that rate, so again, it's even slightly more different because it's only dealing with the maintenance and operation portion of the rate.
Well, and that last sentence is good because most of that map was yellow, which means their appraisal didn't change, so their taxes won't change.
Yeah. The
And
bottom
actually, the
line is,
taxes will go down.
Actually, the taxes will go down, yeah.
everybody that has yellow will have a tax reduction,
So
but
the majority of the city will actually have the taxes go down, but we have to,
the jury stay on this.
and most of it is because we got all the new homes that came in, and it's gonna add to the total tax income.
So,
And then this is something that has to go in the front of the final budget. Once you make a vote, we actually have to put how you voted on the budget. And this is the language that's required, and we'll put your names in here and how you voted, and that goes in the front of the budget document, and it's required by law. So, it used to have to be published in the newspaper, that's no longer there, it's now on the budget cover and on the website.
that obligation, is that new?
That is also new, this is a new notice that will have to be. That's all on the general fund, so, questions on that before we move into?
The real issues there are you okay with the tax rate? Are you okay with the salary, the 3.25% increase, and the other increases that are listed there? And this is where I told y'all before that, we're not diving in how many pencils we're buying, but is it a reasonable increase? We go into whatever depth you want to go, but that's the bottom line. The insurance is up, the salaries are up.
The benefits are actually up, well, 2/3 of what salaries are up, right?
Yeah, and some of that's a little misleading. Some of that salary is additional salary,
personnel.
raise.
Yeah.
A lot of that is our salaries go up 3.25%, our insurance is going up 12 to 15%, depending on what you elect. So that is a little misleading on it.
One question, Gary.
Sir.
I know that we have, I don't know exactly how it works, but we have agreements with the fire and the police as far as steps and things of that nature. Are the other employees in the city adequately compensated equivalently?
I appreciate you asking that question. There is no doubt that our bread is buttered to the police and fire. It's every city. That'll make you crazy. The police and fire salaries, the rank and file, are on a 5-step system. The most of the places are called the non-sworn, the non-civil service. classified on the high end of the compensation scale. The other employees are on the mid-range, and rather than it's not a full step system. We consider midpoint the value of the job. So over a 3-year period, they move to midpoint, provided that they're meeting their expectations. But there is no movement beyond that other than through pure merit. And through the years, we've not always done a good job of funding the merit pool. There is some merit pool, but we looked closely at that, and we've got, we probably got a few that are underpaid on their non-civil service positions. We've got some, I don't think we have any that are, I'd consider overpaid, but we've got a lot of them that are kind of in the mid-range compared to other cities. But the brutal, honest answer to that is, it's police and fire where the money goes. And it's police and fire that we try to keep the most satisfied. Because police and fire, particularly in an economy like this, they can leave and get another job. There's not too much movement like that in our non-civil service. And so that's where the attention paid is to the police and fire, for the most part. Always has been. It's true in every city. But it's not, I think we've got some really well compensated people. One thing that we've done in the last 10 years probably is we've set up the opportunity for our field techs, for example, to be able to grow. There's several positions in Field Tech 1, which is they have no skill whatsoever.
So that was me.
Yeah, you would be a good and then once they learn how to operate equipment or whatnot, then they can advance to Field Tech 2, and even Field Tech 3 if they stay here long enough. So some of our Field Tech 3s are pretty well compensated. On our director level, it is all over the board. A police chief may make $110,000 somewhere else they may make $170,000, and ours is somewhere in the middle. So that's kind of a long answer to a short question, but that's where the emphasis is on police and fire, and on the ones that we need to keep. Once they make a lieutenant, they're not going anywhere.
It's also so expensive to hire either one of those, just between the schoolings and just the time.
I think we have done a better job recently in the police department of hiring the guys from New York, as an example, where we brought down here and they have experience, and they've been able to take a short course and take the license exam and not go to the police academy. You've asked that several times, do we not do that? It's a challenge.
He was saying, you guys got laws here like against rustling. We don't have that.
But it's, those are important people.
What is the value of that 0.25% tax?
Well, it's, that,
74,450 is what I came up with. I did my math earlier.
Mr. Denver's always got the answer, that's real close.
That's right.
It's just under $300,000 per penny,
Right.
so 75. That's cool. And, is that okay with you?
It's just so hard to get, I think in my mind, it's hard to get back. You always see them going to voters for the 0.25% sales tax to fund this major capital improvement. It feels, and I'm just a new kid here, but it feels like if, 47 or 46.75, if we were to keep it at 47, could we then use that in the general fund for merit funding? I don't know if it's that much of a move the needle for a homeowner to say, I saved this much in my property tax this year.
Jeremy, we can relate so completely because we struggled and struggled and struggled with that as a council. Back about, what was it, 2006?
Well, it actually, it goes back beyond that, but the whole times we struggle mightily,
We're
but
gonna have $14 a house.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I, $14 a house, whereas.
Well, what it is, in my opinion, anyway, is we've held it at 47 for all these years.
Yeah.
Fought through everything else. The dropping it to 46.75 is just a signal that
We care.
we care, we're trying to do something. If Glade Parks and then if the Riverwalk and the other developments come on board, we can do more. We really can't afford to do more, but we want to do something. Yeah, is it gonna make a difference to a household, you know, $1 a month or whatever it comes out to be? No, but it's a step.
I was
Yeah.
saying exactly what you were saying back those years ago.
And that's where I would almost want to reward the hard work that has helped us through this 2008 crisis. And then, you know, maybe in 2016, then we take a 50 cent or something, or half a cent, and make it noticeable, or, I don't know. It feels like we're in a position now that we're doing really well. Can we take this and reward the folks who've got us this far through this last
But we're,
5-6
The
years?
325
employees.
is a big increase.
Or-
3.25% is so much more than the
325
industry
is
is
a
doing out
big
there in the
increase over
world.
what.
Oh, I agree.
You're not getting.
Big increase from the
the last couple years.
Okay.
We're, for a
So
couple of years, they were pro.
Okay, that helps me.
Yeah.
but it,
That helps.
I mean,
Well, I also see where Main Street, you know, part of our goals was to find funding or find these revenue sources to help some of these off-the-wall projects that we would want. I don't know.
I appreciate your thought, and, you know, I guess my gray hair and the time I've had here to have heard lots of different opinions. Where I came to quite a few years ago is you just do it the honest way, and you set what you need, which is what we do leading up to about June. And then whatever the revenue comes in, of course, you set your tax rate. And you don't try to artificially increase it or decrease it. If you just, $75,000 is not gonna make one bit of difference on the salary plan. It's not gonna make one bit of difference on Main Street. I mean, if you took $75,000, put it in one place on Main Street, it would. But it's not that, it's not significant. But the honest truth of the matter is, that's what we need to pay our bills. And so, in my mind, we shouldn't collect a dime more than what we need, nor should we falsely lower it, to put it below what we need. And that's how I kind of reconciled it. If you look back in 2007 or 8, there was about a 2-cent drop, and there was a struggle with that amongst the staff. But what it came down to was, it's the right thing to do. We already had our expenses set for our recommendation, and that's where the appraised values came in. That's what it ought to be. Now, y'all can set it, don't set it up more than 80% because we don't get into a rollback situation, but you can set it as high as you want to or as low. It is totally y'all's call. My job is to tell you, this is what we need to run the city. And I can honestly tell you that the employees are well compensated. That $75,000 might make another, I believe, 0.25%. But that's in the general fund. Then you got water, you got Texas Star, they got no money. So they couldn't even afford to pay their employees. So, but I do appreciate the thought. It's a very good thought, but I think as you move forward, the best thing to do is kind of find you a principle to stand on. That's where mine has been is, honestly, the finance department probably prefer we not be cutting the tax rate. But that's what we said from the beginning we were going to be willing to do, but we knew we were going to have growth. And we could pay another employee. But
And I think when I look back on the year that we really struggled with the issue, it was a small decrease in the tax rate. And I was exactly where you were, but we didn't have the development on the horizon that we do now. I could foresee that we had to raise the tax the following year, and to me, that was much worse, is that you lower it and then you go back and you raise it again. And to me, that has much more of an impact on a homeowner.
Yeah.
But right now, we're not looking, we have such a bright future right now that we're not looking at the need to raise it, because we see more revenues coming in on a regular basis. That was
I'd rather
exactly where
take
you
a
were.
1/4% this year, and then hopefully 1/4% next year, or if we can afford more next year, do that, than to wait 2 years and do 50 cents next year.
I think it's just being cautious
I'd
to do
rather
it a little
be
bit.
steadily dropping it. I mean, hindsight, I think we all could go back and not drop it that 2 cents, because that was right before the bottom fell out, where we had to do so much cutting. If we were still at 49 when the whole thing hit, we'd had a much easier time through the recession. So I think gradually dropping it. Now, if all of a sudden we got the 49 million in sales tax that Grapevine has, we could be more aggressive. But I think the idea is to drop it gradually and always show that we're not going to take it up, we're going to keep it steady or drop it and just keep it going that direction as best as we can afford.
I guess I appreciate the most the statement you made earlier, Jerry, when you said, we budgeted, we figured out this is all we need to make it on a dime more. The 46.75 is what you think we need to be able to make it. Once again, not a penny more.
And keep in mind, and I believe I'm right on this is the first year we've finally went higher in expenses than 2008. 7 years later, we're finally just passing the number we had in 2008. So, and we've done all that with that tax rate at 47 cents. So if we can drop that down even lower, then that's, you know, even if it is an incremental drop, it's more of a symbolic drop, I guess you could say. But it shows we're continuing to push it down the best we can. You know, I was running some numbers just on, if we get a department store over there, conservative estimate, a good department store is going to run the equivalent in sales tax of about 1.50 cents on our tax rate. You know, so that's the kind of stuff that we can look at going forward when that moves the needle. You know, Rose's Cafe is great, but it doesn't move the needle on tax rate. But
Good food.
it does. But
Taco Tuesday.
yeah.
That moves the tax rate, just not gonna do it.
Well, that also increases the sewer cost.
Oh, well, what a transition.
So, and I hear what you're saying, but, obviously you gotta
No, I
get 6
agree.
people to go with you, but it's, in general, can we kind of reach the
46, 70.
46, 75? Okay. Thank you.
If I stick with the mayor's timeline, I'm gonna have to really pick up the pace.
You told me you were gonna cut fast.
I can, people know I can tell
Yeah.
them.
Well,
Can we listen that fast? Is the question.
Okay.
Really, we are getting close to the end here. On the debt summaries, this is in tab 6. I'm gonna go pretty fast on this, but this debt number does include the proposed bond sale that we have mentioned on Glade Parks. We have told you in the past that when the tax numbers came, July the 25th, we would know whether or not they met the bogey to get their $6 million bond sale to reimburse them for phase 2 of the infrastructure at Glade Parks. They met that threshold, so they are entitled for that rebate in October or November, whenever we can get the debt sale put together. That debt is fully paid by the tax increment reinvestment zone in the pit. So when you see the 423,646, that includes that new debt sale that we're proposing for Lake Parks. That is interest only for 2 years, and then it's 20-year debt with the principal in the following 20 years. So that number up there is our current debt outstanding plus the Lake Park debt obligation that we will be asking you to do at the beginning of the new fiscal year.
And y'all just remember, I know nobody's suggesting this, but that started out a $30-something million incentive. It's down to a $12 million incentive, but it is a contractual obligation that if there would be some move to not do that, you could forget but they have advanced the money to get the work done, and now we've got to reimburse them. They're bringing the development, so we've got to do it.
And just to
It's
remind
first
you,
served.
how that tax increment financing district works is we literally drew a circle around a border out there, created a zone, and said all the property within this zone is part of a tax increment financing district and part of a public improvement district. We said to the other taxing entities that joined us, which was Tarrant County and the Tarrant County College, that if you will pledge a portion of your property tax, you keep the value that you have today. So that base was set in 2010. That base value stays with you. You don't lose a dime of that. As that property develops and gains value, will you pledge a portion of that growth towards paying for this infrastructure? And they said yes, and we said yes. So we have each pledged a portion of the incremental increase, not the base. And so as that value grows, then we take whatever they pledged, 50% or 75% or whatever the pledge was, and we put that over in the tax increment reinvestment zone fund, and we pay for the debt service on the public improvements that had to go in to make that a reality. That's the road, the bridge, the water, and the sewer. And so it was basically $12 million worth of improvements. And then we issued the first phase of the debt was $3 million. The next debt phase is $6 million, and the final phase is $3 million in round terms. And so the first $3 million we said we'll do, and when you get value on the ground sufficient to pay for that, we'll give you the $6 million. And when you get value on the ground to pay for that, we'll give you the $3 million. And that was to limit the city's liability. And we said in the meantime though, if the tax increment reinvestment zone falls short, then we're going to turn around and levy a PID assessment. And when I say we said, they actually requested. They requested the TERS, they requested the PID. So they requested that this tax be levied on them. This was not something the city put upon them. They came to us and said, we want you to do a PID district. And if there's a shortfall, levy us for the shortfall. So now I understand that since that time in 2010, they may have sold that property off to a new owner, but that new owner had knowledge that they were in a public improvement district that had been created, and they had agreed up front to be assessed for any shortfall. So if there's ever a shortfall in that debt, the TERS pays its part, and then the owners of that property pay the balance. No other taxpayer of the city of Euless is assessed a dime. It is simply the people, and when I say the people, it is the property within that zone. And that zone is basically that property from 121 to Heritage, Chicksbarger, and Mid-City, so Chicksbarger and Ray Road, excluding the Target Center, that's not in it. So it's that piece of property. So that's the way that works, but that is incorporated in this. We have the debt schedules in there. We've talked to you about the debt fall off that we'll see in the COGO debt in 2017. $400,000. We've talked to you about the drop off in EDC debt that we'll pay in 16. We'll see a $700,000 drop. The master plan for that has always been to be able to do the next phase of Parks at Texas Star. You've seen that in the CIP book. The water and wastewater debt's level to 2020. That is when the water tower debt pays off. The golf course debt's level to 2027. That's about $600,000 worth of debt per year there. So obviously, once that's paid off, that will have a lot more profit for the golf course in 2028, Jackie. And then Softball World has 2 more years, 15 and 16. That's about $160,000 worth of debt per year there. And then the taxable COs, that's a Dallas Stars debt, or the Dr. Pepper Star Center, that's about $700,000 a year. And that is all of our debt obligations that are currently outstanding. Our Cardinal Fund, we take in about, for 2015, our proposed revenues are $13,879,560. That's $13,864,560 from the car rental tax and $15,000 worth of interest. And of that, we have to do a rebate of 2/3 of that back to Dallas and Fort Worth for the agreement that got the car rental center in Euless. So that's $9,243,000 that goes back to Dallas and Fort Worth. The council agreed to give 1/3 of our portion to the general fund to basically have a direct reduction of lowering the tax rate and keeping that low. So that's $1,540,000 to the general fund. And then the $872,729 is there was a debt payment Our debt issuance several years ago to acquire some houses on North Main Street and to build a park building, and the council agreed to pay for that from car rental. That's about $200,000 per year, and then it's about $600,000 to the equipment replacement fund, and that's for, primarily for the large fire truck and some of the large pieces of equipment that are coming up in the current year, to make up that shortfall we talked about. And then you have $5,337,000 in proposed capital that Gary will cover in our tab 5. That primarily, that is our carryover of $560,000. That is our street projects that are in the CIP book for $535,000. It's $2 million for a redevelopment incentive, and there's $400,000 for the redevelopment fund, and then an additional $2 million that you would have available for incentives. There is $1,271,000 as a transfer to Carbonell CIP. $700,000 of that is in response to y'all's request that we consider additional reserves. So what we've done is created a $700,000 Carbonell contingency. And then the remainder of that money is for the Glade Park Trail connection and the design of the planning and development building. So of that $1.2 million is there's $700,000 of that for contingency.
And our thought there is, when it was brought up recently about the reserves, which I think is a really good point, but throughout our downturn, we never touched a bit of reserve, which is a good thing. So if we put it in a pure reserve, it just sits there. If we put it in a CIP reserve, then it sits there, the money is still available, but if something comes along that